What is up? Daniel here with the Virtual Robotics Studio, and it is time to wire this robot. So we've got all of our electrical components. Gonna have to figure out how they connect together, get them in the robot, and then we'll be ready to go. Before we start, as always, special thanks to First and Argosy Foundation for making this all possible. All right, there are a lot of pieces. I've got them laid out. I'll kind of point out most of them. But for the most part, you're going to probably be grabbing stuff that we missed or that you couldn't find right away from the bin as we go. First thing that we're going to do is we have the batteries. We're going to have to get the batteries hooked up. So there are these little baggies that mine were a little bit mixed up in the crate. So find these little baggies with bolts. Those are the bolts for the batteries. And of course, the batteries, you want to be a little careful because the terminals are exposed. You're not going to hurt yourself if you touch them both, but if metal connects them, you could have some trouble. So if you're going to leave these sitting around for a long time without getting the battery connectors on, you might want to just put some electrical tape on top of the connectors just to be safe. All right, for those, these are the connectors that we're going to connect. So these are big 6-gauge wire. We need 6-gauge wire to take our main power into the robot. And they've got these fancy connectors on the end. These are Anderson connectors, and they click together, but they only fit in one direction, so you can't mix up the polarity. So these are really cool. We're going to have one of these for each battery, and one of these will be on the robot to plug the batteries into. Now, for the batteries, I couldn't find suitable ring terminals in the kit, so you might have to go out and buy these. I got a couple different options, so we'll do it 2 different ways, but I've got 6-gauge ring terminals. The post hole is a little bit big on these, so we might have to do some bigger washers or something like that, but that is one way to connect it. And then I've also got these offset terminal lugs. So this is another way that we can kind of slide the wire in and screw down to tighten it. But we need some way to connect, our wires to the batteries. So those are a couple options there. All right, the battery charger is in this cardboard box, so just keep an eye on that. If you get some extra of these connectors, you could put one of these on the charger wires instead of these alligator clips, so it's easier to plug in and charge your batteries. Also, we're going to need 6 of these SparkMaxes. You should have exactly 6, I think, in your kit of parts. We need the Rev Robotics Power Distribution Hub. We're going to need the Rev Robotics Radio Power Module. Inside of here, this is actually the radio, and when we say radio, really it's just a network bridge. So this is going to connect to your computer wirelessly or the field wirelessly, so we'll be able to drive our robot around wirelessly with that. Inside here, this is the RoboRio, so this is like the main computer. This is the thing that runs everything in the robot, so we need that, of course. Also, we're going to need 2 Ethernet cables. I found one in my kit of parts and I had to buy a second one. So you might need to pick up a second one, or if you have one lying around, they can be pretty short. To connect wires together, there's a couple options. In the kit of parts are these spade connectors. And the way they work is you kind of crimp a wire in both sides and you plug them in together. These are hard to plug in and hard to unplug, and sometimes the crimps don't work great. So if you have a little bit extra in your budget, I strongly encourage picking up some of these Wago lever nuts. So these, you just lift up the levers, slide the wire in, push the lever down, and you're done. It's connected. So these are almost foolproof. They're great. They work extremely well. I use these in almost all of my projects. And I did find a pack at Home Depot. I think we'll need 12 of them total, so you might need 2 of the 10 packs. All right, we're going to need fuses. There are 2 different bags of fuses in there. We'll double check that you have the right one when we assemble them, but you need the one that says 40 amp written on the top. I think the other ones say 30 amp or 20 amp. We shouldn't need those. There is some extra wire. We probably don't need too much of the big wire. This is 12-gauge wire. We will need some of the smaller wire. And then inside, this is another, I guess, Rev Robotics bag. But inside of here, this green and yellow wire we need, and we may need some of these red, black, and white wires to extend some stuff. You'll also need the electrical tape. So I think there was red and black electrical tape in there. Or any electrical tape you have will be fine. Cable ties are going to be great for us to fasten some of our electronics down. It's faster than bolting, and since the electronic components are pretty light, they're not going anywhere. Another way that we will connect some of the stuff is with Velcro. I think there's this dual lock stuff that came in the kit of parts, so we'll use this for the most part, but you can also use the just Velcro that you can buy at the store that has adhesive on one side and sticks together. So I think that's most of what we need. Obviously, we can't do any work with all this stuff on the table. So I'm gonna move all this out of the way. We'll come back and we'll start with the batteries. All right, so let's start with the batteries. We're gonna figure out how to connect our pre-wired Anderson connector to the batteries here. And the first way we'll do it, I guess we'll try to use these ring terminals. So I got 6-gauge ring terminals, and they are very big. And basically the way these work, if you look inside, there's metal, and then the blue is just sort of a plastic housing around it. But the wire, and we can just pull kind of the ends here off, the wire will just slide right inside, and it should be a pretty good fit. And you slide that in as far as it goes, basically, because the insulation will hit the ring terminal, so I can't push it in anymore. You can also bring it back a little bit if you don't want too much of that wire sticking out, but you want to make sure that the blue part covers up any of the extra wire that's here. You want to definitely get that all covered up. And then you get your biggest pair of whatever you have. These are actual crimpers for this, so they've got a little point on them that will help crush it down, but you need something relatively big. Biggest pair of pliers, biggest pair of crimpers that you have. If you have to, you could put these in the vise and try to crush it down that way, but you just need to squeeze pretty much as hard as you can, because we do not want this connection to be loose. And when you're done squeezing that, you want to give it a tug test. Basically, we'll do this with almost every wire we do, but with this one, pull basically as hard as you can pull on it. And it shouldn't move. If it doesn't move, you're good to go. All right, then we'll do the same thing for the red wire. And aim for the metal section here, not the just where it's plastic in the back. So I'm up close towards the front. And again, squeeze it as hard as you can. All right, that seems good. Okay, that part's done. Now we have to attach this to the battery. And one of the problems that we have is these ring terminals are so big that the bolts that came in that little baggie, so we got this little baggie of bolts, the bolt, I think, just falls right through. And the washer will fall through too. So in order to use this, we're going to end up needing an extra washer, a bigger washer. So I just have a random washer that I found. It looks like I found one that fits through the bolt. The bolt hole fits through the middle. And this washer does not fit through the hole on my connector here, my ring terminal. So that's all we're looking for. And what we're going to do is the bolt. Let's see, we have a few different pieces. Let's clarify that. So we have 2 bolts. We have 2 of these split washers. So if you look at them carefully, they have like a cut in the middle, and so it's not a continuous thing all the way around. Those are supposed to be lock washers. They help to keep it from loosening up a little bit. Then we have 2 regular washers and 2 nuts. And we can kind of do this in any order we want, but I'm going to start out with the bolt. And the bolt is going to go just fine into here and not necessarily need anything else. But I'm going to put, let's put the lock washer on that side. Okay. Then we can put our wire in here, our ring terminal in here. And then we need to put our big washer that's going to catch the ring terminal. And then we should be able to just tighten the nut down onto it. So this isn't ideal. You can see how big that ring terminal is compared to where we're connecting stuff here. So ideally, you can find something a little bit smaller. You might be able to get a number 8 gauge ring terminal and just really work hard to get the wire to fit inside of it. That could work. Or try to find alternative ring terminals. When I ran over to, I think Home Depot is next to us, this was all they had, so we're going to make it work. All right, and then we need 5/16 wrenches. So either 2 5/16 wrenches or a 5/16 wrench and a socket. And we basically are just going to tighten this down. And this one we want to make fairly tight. There's nothing here that we can really damage by over tightening it, as long as you're not sort of torquing and twisting on that battery terminal. So make this one tight. like tight, tight. And that's about all I can do, all right? And you should feel that this doesn't move around when it's connected there. You might be able to get it to rotate a little bit, but for the most part, that's gonna be locked in. All right, we do the same thing on the other side. Okay, so bolt and the lock washer, I'll come in from the outside, then put the ring terminal on. And it doesn't matter if the ring terminal's on the inside or the outside. You can kind of do it in whichever order you want. And then my big washer, and then we'll get that nut started. Okay, and once again, we're going to tighten it down all the way. All right, and you may want to think about which direction you want this stuff to go. So right now, I think this is probably not ideal because our wires are going to kind of go up and then bend back down. So I actually think let's loosen these up, and you can always adjust this later too. But I think I might want my wires to be pointing more upright like this when I connect them. So that's what I'm going to do with this side, and then we'll change the other side to match. Nice and tight, not going anywhere. Same thing here. Yeah, that seems like it's probably going to work better for us, but it also probably would have worked fine the other way as well. And that's tight. Okay, now this, yeah, that feels better to me when we go down to plug it in like right here. Okay, all of the exposed metal is going to get you in trouble when you go to an event and the inspector checks out your robot. So we need to cover all of the metal with electrical tape. Now, I have red and black, so I will put red on the red side and black on the black side. But in theory, I think you can get away with any color. But it is best if you make the colors match, just so when you go through inspection, they want to know which side is the positive side of your circuit and which side is the negative side. So we're just going to kind of do our best to get this as low as possible here. And then we're just going to wrap it around a few times. Like that. And I'll actually go up onto the that insulation that we had earlier. Just because I think it'll stick better there to finish. And then we'll get that nice and flat. So you can see it's basically covered. You can't see any of the metal. And you know, if you do this and it looks like you still see some, just cut another strip of tape and do it again. All right, let's do the other side as well. Same way. This one felt a little longer, like I had to cover more of it, but that's all right. And we are good. So that is one way you can do the battery. Since I got to do a second one anyway, let's go ahead and do that one in a slightly different way. So bring our second battery up, got our second bag of stuff, tear that up. So this time I bought these. It is a offset terminal lug 2-pack. Just make sure you get it so that it can handle 6-gauge wire, because that's what we're using. And in this case, what you do is, inside here, this screw can be used to loosen or tighten this section that will open up and then crush down. So we have a spot in here that we can feed the wire in, and then we use the screwdriver to tighten down on it instead of the clamping pliers that I used in the last step. So in this case, let's see, I'm going to want this to go on this way. So I'm going to slide the wires in from that edge. Make sure that the metal stays on the wire. Don't go up onto the housing with it. And then we're basically going to just tighten this down. And once again, this is a connection where, so loose connections, loose electrical connections means that they have higher resistance. And when your circuit has higher resistance, that means you have more what we call voltage drop. So basically, loose connections means your robot is going to have less power available to it, and that can cause all kinds of problems. So I'm going to make this just about as tight as I can. If you have a vise, you can actually clamp this part up in the vise, and then that'll help hold it steady for you while you try to tighten it with the screwdriver. All right, and once again, tug test, pull hard. If it doesn't come out, that's good. All right, so one side is done. Let's do the other side now. Gotta unscrew that. So we've got enough room here. Okay, and then we'll slide this in. Same deal. Now we just make it as tight as we can. All right, and tug test, that's good. Okay. Now we're going to connect this onto our battery. Let's see. I kind of like going like this so that the extra big posts end up on the inside. But I guess the way I attach these lugs, yeah, that's what I want. You can usually kind of twist these wires around to face the way you want. So I think I'm going to go this way with my two wires. And then we should be able to get this to twist around a little bit. If you can't get it to the angle that you want it to be at, to come around and plug in like this, you can loosen these up and rotate the way the wires are fitting. Okay, and then it's going to be kind of the same pattern, except now we don't have a gigantic, ugly hole. So now what we can do is I'm going to go with the bolt and then the washer that came in the kit, and that fits nicely on my lug here. And then I'll feed that in. And then on the inside, I'll put that split washer, that lock washer, and then the nut. So it's a little harder to reach on the inside with the terminal there. Let me see. I think I'll have better luck getting it started if I just let that tip down. Okay. All right, and then I think just like before, oh, nope, it won't rotate. So let me loosen this back up. There we go. I think just like before, I want this facing up when I'm done, or mostly up. So we'll kind of hold that up and go in here and tighten it the rest of the way. There we go. And once again, tight is good. Pretty good. That one feels like it's not going anywhere. Let's do the same thing now on the other side. So bolt and washer. Then we'll go through the lug here. Split washer on the inside. And then the nut. Yep. Just not quite. There we go. I think it started now. Yeah, now we're good. Okay, and as you're working here, be extra careful that you don't cross any pieces of metal between the two lugs here. In fact, probably the smartest thing to do with this one, because we got to get those wrenches in while these things are fairly exposed. Let's go ahead and tape up the red side, and then we'll go back and finish tightening up our negative side here. Okay, and this is the same way. You can get some big heat shrink boots or things like that that might help cover these lugs up a little bit better. They're just so big that we're definitely gonna be using a decent amount of wire. Also, the screw that we use to tighten it, it's a little bit sharp and pointy, so I'm gonna go over that a couple times just so we have 2 layers of tape there so it doesn't cut through. And then we'll continue up onto, all the way up onto the wire here. You get one more pass down there. And once again, once you're done with the tape, if you see any exposed wire, just get some more tape and keep going. All right, now I feel more comfortable having this wrench at, you know, an angle like this, and we'll go ahead and tighten it up the rest of the way. All right, that looks good. Not going anywhere. Let's do the other insulation here. And again, I'm going to go over that bolt an extra time just to make sure. Looks good. All right, so both of these work. The last thing I'm going to say about batteries before we move on is we want these connections to stay nice and tight. Those lugs that are coming out of the battery are not the strongest part of the battery, so you should never carry your battery by the wires. There's like these little handles here, so just grab it there when you need to pick it up and put it down. All right, batteries are done. Let's get these out of the way, and let's start working on the rest of the robot. All right, let's put one of these batteries in the robot, just so we have something to work from. And I think it works the best if you have the wires pointing back, because like I said, it's going to fold down and plug in like right here. And why not? Let's put the strap on. Cool. Okay, then from the battery, the next place we have to go is this power switch. Power switch is interesting because the on and the off buttons are different. So to turn it off, you press the red button here that's poking up. And when you do that, this other little flag pops out. And to turn it on, you push that tab in. So that can throw some people for a loop the first time they see it. All right, so this, the red wire, is going to have to plug into this. So we're going to want this somewhere in this neighborhood. Our goal here is just kind of lay everything out. We want to make sure everything fits and that it's in generally a good spot, and then we'll go through and start wiring each piece individually. So this needs to be somewhere around the battery over here. Then the next place we're going is the big REV power distribution board, or hub. So we'll take that out. And there's actually a couple things we have to do with this before we want to put it in. There is, inside the box, in addition to some stickers, there's a USB-C cable, which you can use to update the firmware on the board. So there's a USB-C plug here down in the corner next to the yellow and green ports. Then, also next to the yellow and green ports, we've got these sections labeled 20, 21, 22, and 23. And there's a bag of fuses, and we're going to put some of these fuses into those spots. And there are two different fuses here. The red ones are 10, I believe, amps, and the blue ones are 15 amps. So we need to take the two red fuses and put one of them in, let's use 20 and 21. So there are little spots for it where the metal will line up and drop in. And we're just going to push that down. Make sure it's in all the way when you push that down. Okay, and then we'll do the same thing at 21 here. And that is where we're going to plug stuff in later. So they're going to need fuses. And with these fuses, you can look in the side, and you can actually see there's like a V or a U of metal going between the two legs. And when you look inside, if you see that shape, it's good. If you see some burn marks and missing metal and not that shape, then the fuse blew and you need to replace it. So that's a troubleshooting step for later. You may want to pick up another 10 amp fuse if you get around to it, but they don't really pop too often, so it's not super critical. And if you're at competition, there should be some spares at the spare parts table for you. All right, so the rest of this we don't need right now. So let's put that back in the box. This is sort of next. The other end of this is going to, eventually, the red goes to the power switch, and then it goes to this red port here on our power distribution hub. The black wire is just going to go straight to the black port. So this, like, I don't think it would make sense for us to put this like on this side of the robot, because that's, you know, we'd have a long run of wire unnecessarily. So I like to try to keep this close. I don't really think it fits too well, you know, next to the battery here. Like, it's a little close to the edges, so it's going to be hard for me to actually use these levers. So I think I'm going to start by putting this kind of in the middle here. And let me get these wires. I'm going to try to tuck these wires out of my way for now. Jam them into the drivetrain over here. And then I'll do the same thing with these wires. Because eventually these wires are not going to be you know, all dangled there. We're going to strap them up and route them nicely to wherever we want them to go. But this seems to fit pretty well in between the motors. So I kind of like that spot for that. With all of these things that we're doing, this layout for all of the electrical stuff, if you're building more stuff onto your robot, if you have other things that attach in certain places, none of this needs to be specifically where I'm putting it. Find a layout that works for you. If you want to use the same layout as me, that'll work, but work through the logic of it's nice to keep your big wires short. They're heavy, but also the longer the wire is, the more power you lose. The wire is also going to have some resistance. So keeping those wires short is a generally good idea. Is it the end of the world if this were mounted all the way over here and you had long wires? No, it probably still works fine. If you have to do that, do it. Okay, so we like that there. What else have we got? I guess another big piece that we want to find a place for is this computer here. This is our RoboRio. Let's go ahead and take that out of its bubble wrap. Okay, and we can do a really quick, brief overview of this before we bury it in the robot. And actually, there's a little card in here that has most of this information on it too. We're not using most of the ports on here, so we don't have to worry too much about it. One of the things that we're going to want to do is after we're done plugging everything into this, you can see there are all of these open pins, and those are electrical connectors. And if you're ever working on your robot, or you need to drill an extra hole, or whatever, shavings, aluminum shavings can fall in these holes and create a short circuit. So what we're going to do is once everything is set up in here, we'll probably go through and cover all of these ports with tape. There's a 3D printed design floating out there that I think gives you stuff that can just plug in and cover stuff up. You could design your own, but tape works really well. So some of the things that we're concerned with on here is in the top corner here is the CAN port. We're going to need to hook wires up to that. We also have input. This is power for our RoboRio here. We're going to hook stuff up to that. There's an SD card right here, and that is carrying the kind of the firmware and your program. So we're actually going to have to pop that SD card out at some point and you know, format it and get it set up ready to run. We're not going to use any of the, so I2C and RS-232 are forms of communication. So if you had another computer and you wanted them to talk to each other, that might be a place we put that. There's some sensors that speak those languages as well. We're not doing any of that. DIO is where you could attach digital input-output. So if you had like limit switches or any kind of switch that you wanted to read, it would plug in here. I don't think we're doing any of those by default on this robot. The RSL stands for Robot Signal Light. We will have to plug one of those in and find a place to attach that on our robot. Relays and analog in, we're not going to be using those. Relays, like if you were controlling LEDs or something like that, you could turn it on or off. Analog in, if you have analog sensors, you could read them in like potentiometers. So like the dial on a stereo, it's not just on or off, but you have different volume levels. So that is a potentiometer. We could read in that there. In the bottom corner, we have reset and user buttons. So these are just some buttons to reset it or switch to the user mode. And then we have the PWM over here. PWM stands for pulse width modulation. You don't need to know that. Just know that we're going to plug our motor controllers in on this PWM side here. So we will need to access that. And SPI is another form of communication. We're not going to use that either. Also at the top, we've got an Ethernet port. We're going to plug a network cable in there. And then there are two USB ports here that you can use to plug in accessories. So like if you're using a webcam to be able to stream video from your robot back to your driver, that's where you would plug it in. And then this square USB port is where you could plug in a cable to plug directly into the RoboRio from a computer. So sometimes the network port doesn't work and you can't find the RoboRio, so the next thing to try is plugging in the USB port. Actually, I would start with USB if you have to plug directly in. We hopefully will not have to do that. Okay, let's find a spot for this inside the robot. I think probably our best bet is somewhere over here where we have lots of space. And I think what I would maybe do is turn it this way so that all of the PWMs are easy to access here in the middle. We can still get to our other things, and this way could work too. Maybe this way's good. I would not put it underneath this lip because then getting to those wires would be very hard for us. So, and if we did it this way underneath there, we would not be able to get to our power and our CAN wires here. So I think maybe something like this is a good starting point to think about. All right, next up we have 6 boxes of SparkMax speed controllers. And we're going to do this same thing for all of them. So if we open it up, let me come over to this side here. We are going to do a small bit of assembly on each of these first before we drop them in the robot. So a few things to know about these. These are what are actually going to control our motors. So we need a way to talk to the RoboRio, so the RoboRio can tell this what to do. And then this, the V plus and V minus side, are going to connect to our power distribution hub. That was this guy right here in the middle. So that's going to give them power, mains power. And then A, B, and C are going to connect to the motor. And so that will actually send the power through to the motor. Now, there is this little plug here that fits into this pins on the top. Since we're not plugging anything into those pins, we can just put that in, and now it's covered and aluminum shavings can't get inside there, and short it out. The green wires are for CAN. So if you are switching from PWM, which is the default setup for this robot, to CAN, you'll be using the yellow and green wires instead. If you're doing PWM, though, you need this white and black wire. And if you look next to the V plus and V minus, there's a USB port where you can actually update the firmware for this guy too. But next to that is where we plug in our white and black PWM cable. So there are 2 different connectors on the ends. One of them is white, one of them is black. The white one will plug in here. And it only fits one way. So if you're trying to plug it in and it doesn't go, you'll have to flip it over. But what you should see is there's a little groove guide on the bottom. And on the top, you should be able to see the silver contacts where the wires are plugging in. And so that is just going to go right in there, and you just push it all the way in. And this here is actually a housing that will let you put 2 of these PWM cables together and then lock them in place. You would slide them in from the side. So we definitely want to save that. We might need that. In fact, save all 3 of these things. We might need all of them at some point in the future. So we're going to do that for all 6 of our SparkMaxes here. And we'll get that done really quickly. Okay, so let's look at where we might want to place these inside the robot. We have our 6 motors. We have 2 on each side of our drive down here on the bottom, and then we have our 2, well, one is the shooter motor, one's the feeder motor up here on the top. And we can extend wires. We could add more wires in between, but if we can just plug the wires directly in, that's a good spot for us to put these. So what might be nice is to take 2 of them on this side, maybe something like that, maybe something like this. Because that will let us plug directly into, so the V plus and V minus has to go into our hub here, something like that, and then the other ends would connect to the motor wires. So I like having a couple over here for that side drive, and then I guess we might as well do a couple over here for this side's drive, and they reach the PDH fine, and we have the drive wires here that will line up. And then we have the other wires coming down from our shooter and our feed up here. And the other one here. So you have these wires coming down that we need to connect to. So if we get one kind of close back here, I think we can get the wires without needing to add any extra wire. And going forward, we can just maybe barely reach the PDH here. So maybe we end up with a couple of them like this for those 2 motors. The last 2 things we have to put in here is the radio and the radio power module. So this is going to be the way that the radio gets powered. Now, there is a barrel jack on the back that you could use to power this. The barrel jack is not great on robots though, because barrel jacks are just not designed for like things that we're moving around and having impacts and vibrations and shaking. Whereas the Ethernet port actually is designed for that. So the Ethernet port does something that we call PoE, or power over Ethernet. And so what's going to happen is we're going to take and connect one end of this into power here. So these will connect to power, and it will then feed power through this side to the radio to power the radio right through that Ethernet cable that we're using. Then the other side will plug into our computer for communication. So this needs to go somewhere where we have some space, and this needs to kind of go near this or near the RoboRio. So we have a couple of choices here. It looks like there is probably enough room for us to tuck our radio in here and have our radio power module over there. That's one option. If you're using a lot of the space over here for other stuff, for more building, that might be the best place to put it. It's also pretty short wires from our from our Ethernet port, although that cable is going to just kind of be whatever length it is. The other end of this, the power on this does get plugged in all the way over here on the other side of the PDH. So connecting it on this side might make some sense as well. So I think I kind of like the idea of having this one somewhere around here, and then this one somewhere around here. Maybe like this, maybe like this. The other thing that I'll say too is you generally want the lights on the radio to be visible. That's when you go to a competition, when you go out to a match, the people who are making sure you're connected to the field and everything is working are going to be looking at those lights. So I don't want to put those lights like underneath. If I put this here but buried it way underneath, nobody can see that. So it's going to be harder for them to troubleshoot any issues that you might be having. And the other thing too is on the RoboRio, there are some lights that you want to make visible as well. Okay, so I'm actually pretty good with a layout something like this. I'm pretty happy with that. And that is all the pieces. So again, once you have everything kind of laid out where you would like for it to go, like for example, you might have another SparkMax that you have to use. If you have another motor that's powered, maybe you did a hanger, maybe you did something else to help try to pick up stuff off the floor. So you might have more SparkMaxes, you might have more stuff to fit on this electrical board. And you can approach this in a couple different ways. If you know everything that you're going to put on, then you can put it on right from the beginning and line everything up. If you don't, this board has plenty of extra space for me to add more stuff, so I'm not really worried about it if I decided to add something later. Okay, so we have our layout. I'm going to get rid of the boxes and bring in some of the tools and other parts we need to make all of our connections. All right, we're going to kind of work our way from here back. So the next thing we have to do is get something in the robot to be able to plug this into. Now, I'm not really going to plug it in because I don't want to have the loose ends of live wire. But the idea is if this is mounted here, then we'll be able to plug that in and unplug it, and it stays attached right to this bracket here. And if you remember, we put these little bolts and nuts in just for that purpose. So let me go ahead and pull this battery out so it's not in the way while we do this. And I can take these back out. And this should go up against it. If you look, there's the side where it looks sort of flat all the way across, and you can see Anderson Power Products written on it. And then the other side, it's got sort of these cutouts, and you can see the plus and minus. The plus and minus should face in against this bracket, and we'll bring the bolts from the outside through the bracket onto our little nut that we saved from earlier. Okay, and one more for the bottom hole. And then these, we're going to tighten them up. You're going to need a 1/4 inch socket probably for this side, and the nut is 5/16. And we can just go ahead and See if I can get in there. Yep, just barely. Might actually, that is spinning on me, so I think I might need to, let's see, I'll try pushing a little harder and see if it goes. Nah, let me grab a 1/4 inch wrench and see if I can get that in there instead. So yep, just the housing is getting in the way. So that looks like it should hold. There we go. This one doesn't have to be super tight. Just make sure it's all the way closed. Okay. So then battery goes in. Battery can plug right down into there. Then we got to follow these wires to where they need to go next. So the first one is easy. The first one is the black wire is going to go just into our power distribution hub. And we could maybe cut this a little bit shorter, but I think I'm not going to bother. It's not going to save us that much to make it shorter. And all you have to do here is just lift up the lever on the black terminal here. Then slide this wire in. Down at the bottom, there's a hole for the wire to slide in. And just try to keep all of the wire strands going in. That's the hardest, that's the trickiest part of this. And just kind of push that in and then lower the lever down. And we do that tug test. So I'm going to pull on it. It's not coming out. So that wire is in and good. Next, the red side. Now we could plug the red side in here. And what would happen is when you plug the battery in, it turns on. When you unplug the battery, it turns off. That would work technically, but would not be legal. So we need to have this running through our power over here. So we can put this power switch anywhere around here. But this is going to connect onto one of the sides of the power switch. And it doesn't matter which side you connect it to. And then the other side, we're going to have to make a cable to go from the other side into there. So let's see. That means we're going to need to put another ring terminal on this wire. So let's grab those crimpers back. And we'll go ahead and use the slightly too big looking ring terminals here. And get those on. And then, again, we're going to just squeeze the heck out of it. Now let's go this way. Make sure that's really smashed in there. All right, that looks good. And I need to unscrew these nuts. I think they are they're 7/16. So you may need a 7/16 socket to get them started. And then you should be able to do the rest of it just with your fingers. So we'll unscrew one of them. Let me see, let's think. Do we want the switch this way? Or this way? I don't think it matters. I'm gonna aim for this way so that we can see this switch a little bit easier from this side of the robot. So let's unscrew this one all the way. And then we're gonna drop that ring terminal on. And this one, the nut I think is big enough that we can not put a washer, but check your ring terminal. You may need to put a washer here just to make sure you get good contact. Okay, and then we're just gonna tighten that down all the way. Until it's nice and tight. Now this one, you want to make sure it's tight, but if you go super hard, you can break that little post off, that little stem that's in there. So don't over tighten it, but when it's tight, it shouldn't really rotate around on you. And then the next thing is this little cover doesn't do quite enough safety-wise. So your inspectors will probably ask you to tape that up. So let's grab some more of our electrical tape. I'm not really sure what the best way to do it is, but I'll start here and, I don't know, kind of wrap it around. Something like that. I don't know if the hat still fits. Yeah, it still fits. There we go. All right, so that is now insulated and safe. This we can now attach anywhere, you know, around this neighborhood, wherever we want it to be. Maybe I'll move it over a little bit more so we have some room in the middle for other stuff if we want. Anywhere around there. Now, our next step is we have to get from the other side of the switch to the red port on our PDH. Right? So basically this switch, when it's open, it stops electricity from flowing through. When we close it, then electricity can flow through. So we need this on one side. And you should have some extra, both red and black 6-gauge wire in the kit of parts. And what I would like to do with this one is I'm just going to kind of measure to the position that I'm in, roughly. And always leave yourself just a little bit extra when you're doing that. You never need it to be so tight, right? So if I start at the PDH here, and I bring the other end around, you can see, okay, I want somewhere around this much wire to be able to make that connection. So I'll kind of just mark that with my fingers here and take it out. And that is where I want to cut this. Now, my big pliers here have cutters on the end. This is going to take a bit, and if you don't have big beefy cutters like this, you may have to cut like halfway through the wire and then cut from the other side through. Even with this, it took a bit. All right, and I don't remember which side I wanted, but it looks like I cut it almost exactly in half, so probably either side works. But we'll check. Yeah, I think my shorter one is the one I was going for. Now, the next thing we have to do is we need to strip the ends of this. So the other one that we got came with stripped ends, and we just pulled it off, and that was very nice. This time we can't do that. There are a few different ways to do this. They sell wire strippers for big gauge wire that you kind of roll around, and then you can peel it off. But in this case, I don't have that, and you probably don't either. You can use just the cutters and try to just cut in a little bit to make it work. I think what works really well, if you're careful, is the razor blade and the utility knife. So I'm going to go in about, 3/4 of an inch, about the same amount that all of the other ones were stripped. And if you just kind of cut in with that and you roll the wire, carefully, and you got to just watch to make sure it lines up with your initial cut. That should give us a little stripped section here. And pulling is hard, but if you sort of bend the wire, that usually gets it moving or gets it to start moving. And if this was on the cut edge, it might be a little hard too because you can see it where it's crushed in. But what you want to look for is if you pull this out and you see any insulation still inside there instead of the wire, just means you didn't cut quite deep enough. So just kind of go back through it. And now I can see the wire there. And I'll just kind of bend it the other way. So now I see wire all the way around. So now I should have a pretty good chance of wiggling that off. And if you need to use a pair of pliers on this, you can. And the key here is just don't cut too hard with the utility knife. You should see none of these strands of wires being cut. If you cut one or two of them, that's okay. If you cut a couple, it's not really going to hurt anything. Okay, so this is going to go into there. Now the other side we need to strip again. That one's going to go into our housing here. So this one I'm going to strip a little bit less this time. So I'm going to do a little bit shorter one right about here. And it's just going to be the same thing. So I'm going to just push in and rotate the wire and try to aim so I end up back where I started. And sometimes if you miss, you might have to cut on a little bit of an angle just to connect everything. And that's fine. It doesn't have to be a nice, clean, straight cut. And then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to start bending it. I can see this side is still insulation. So I'll just kind of cut back through that groove a little bit. And now we got wire there. This side needs a little bit more. And yeah, there we go. So now we can try to wiggle that off. Close the razor blade up. And on goes our ring terminal here. And then we crush it down as much as possible. Always tug test, looks good. Okay, so inside here now, I'm gonna unscrew the bolt on the power switch here, drop that ring terminal on again, and then get this started. We'll tighten that all the way back down. And that's tight. And once again, let's cover that with electrical tape so that we are legal. You could skip this step, you would probably be fine, but when you get to the event, they will stop you from competing until you cover it up. So you might as well just get it done right off the bat. It is a little bit safer to do it now. And we'll just kind of, cover that up as best we can. Stick the little hat on there. All right, cool. And then the other end, we're now ready to go into our power distribution hub over here. Okay, so on our PDH, we're gonna lift the red lever, slide this wire in, and drop the lever down. And now what we've done is we've completed the wiring of this. And I can give this a small upward bend if we need, but we've completed the wiring of this. So now what we can do is we know kind of this switch is good here. So let's go ahead and attach our switch permanently so it doesn't move. Most of the things that we're going to attach electrically is going to be Velcro or zip ties. The switch is the one thing I like to bolt in. It has extra holes for the bolts, and it just feels like you push kind of hard on it a lot, and it'll wiggle around. So I like to have that nice and secured. So somewhere over here looks good. What we're going to do now is grab a drill and a 1/4-inch drill bit. And of course, you'll need some safety glasses. And the 1/4-inch drill bit fits through the hole. So this is what you want to check before you go. If your drill bit fits through the hole on the switch, then that's the right size. If it doesn't fit through, get a little bit smaller size. And it can be a decent amount smaller if you need it to. All right, and I'm just going to kind of put this where I'm happy with it. And I'm just going to drill right through the hole in the, through the wood. Okay, that's one bolt hole. Let's go get the bolts for that. So I drilled a 1/4-inch hole. So we're going to want some more of those 1/4-inch bolts. And the ones that we used earlier were, let's see, what are the shortest ones we have? They're pretty long. Maybe I should have done a number 10 hole, but okay. If you have extra number 10 bolts, you could have done that. If you don't, that's okay. We can do 1/4-inch hardware. The hole on here is a 1/4-inch, so it'll be slightly easier. Now, the one issue that we have is my bolt is a little bit too long, so I don't want to put this bolt going this direction because that is going to stick way down below the frame of the robot. So I got to kind of tip it up a little bit, and I'll reach up from the bottom with that bolt. Then we can drop this on and start the nut. Okay, then it is 7/16, so hopefully the socket, the socket does fit. So that's good. And then underneath, I need to hold it with another 7/16 wrench. So I'm going to reach under the robot, and then we can go ahead and start tightening. And I think because this bolt was very long, this is going to take a minute. Okay, we're there. That one is tight. And I'm gonna just do the same thing now for the other hole. So we'll just drill right through it. This is an advantage of doing our electrical board out of wood instead of metal. If this were metal, I would not be so cavalier about having all my electronics on it and drilling, but wood is not conductive. So if any of this sawdust gets in the electronics, it's not gonna do anything. But let's get that bolt through now. And I'll get a wrench on the bottom. Oh wait, let's start the nut here, and then we'll get the wrench on the bottom. And tighten this one up too. Yeah, shorter bolt would have been nice here. So if you've got it, use it. All right, we're in and we are tight on that. So now we have main power from the battery to the power switch to the power distribution hub. Next step, let's start wiring up our speed controllers. So I can get rid of the drill. And what we're gonna need for this step is a wire stripper, a pair of wire strippers. Okay, and I have this automatic kind, which is great. If you have one where you kind of squeeze and then pull it out, that's also fine. Either way is gonna work, but we're gonna now jump inside here. And we're sort of like, as we do this, we're sort of building power from the main battery through as it spreads out, and that's the way we're going through the system to make sure we get everything hooked up. Now, our power distribution hub is gonna go somewhere around here. We have some choices. I can pull it like way over so it's against these motors. I can pull it way over this way so it's against these motors. I can try to center it. I actually think if it's a little bit off-centered, that's better, because we have a row down here that we can use easily, and then being off-centered means I have more of these that I can get to. So I'm aiming somewhere around here. Now, for this, there are holes. We could drill and bolt this in place. That is an option. Looks like these are smaller bolt holes. But I think in the past I have done a lot of Velcro and it has been good enough. So let's grab some of that Velcro and see what happens. And the good part about this is if we Velcro it in and it doesn't feel secure enough, the Velcro can stay there and we can add a bolt, right? So it's all just gonna help. So let's take the Velcro, and I'm gonna do a lot. So I'm gonna do a strip that's like the full length of this. So we'll cut that. And then I'm gonna do another one that's kind of the full length of it. And then, are we good with 2, or do we want to do 3? Let's see how 2 feels before we go too crazy here. And this stuff is great. This again, I think this was in the kit of parts. This is dual lock, so it's the same on both sides. So you don't have to worry about making sure that the rough side and the fuzzy side are in the right place. So I think I can take this out and kind of fold it up this way so I can get access to it. And then we're just gonna get a nice long strip of this Velcro along here. Just don't cover the holes, because if we do end up wanting to put a bolt through, we don't want the holes to be in the way. So peel one end off, stick it down. Okay, and make sure you kind of press down along the whole thing pretty hard. Okay, the last thing I'm gonna do is inside the robot, make sure there's no sawdust where we're gonna stick it down, make sure it's kind of clean. Then we'll go ahead and peel these off. Peel them, there we go, peel them off. And then we just need to find that spot that we kind of liked, which was mostly towards the motors, not exactly in the center. And then just push down hard. Again, we need to get that glue to set in there. and a bond. And now you can check it. Like, if I pull straight up, I can get it to just barely pop free. So that is very, very good. I am not worried about that. And the glue didn't give up. So let's just lock that back in. So I'm pretty confident that that is going to not go anywhere when we're driving around. Again, if you are extra careful, go ahead and you can drill and bolt holes in. If you have the Velcro there, I think you probably just need to do 2, like on opposite diagonals. You definitely do not need all 4 holes filled with stuff. Okay, so power distribution hub is in and anchored. Now we're going to start connecting each of our motors to it as we go. So let's go ahead and start stripping the ends on some of these motors. Or speed controllers, sorry. So we have, let's see, we want to get 4 in this area, and then we want to get our 2 on the other side. So we can start with the 2 on the far side of me, I guess the near side for you. And I'll just kind of move some things out of the way so we're only looking at that speed controller. So this one we thought could go somewhere here. And that still seems good. So we're going to strip the wire ends, the sides that say V minus and V plus. And you want to strip about, I don't know, that much. You can do a little bit more. A little bit less probably also works. Okay, and I'm going to strip both of them. So I did about a 1/2 inch here. Okay, and then we're going to lift up some of these levers. I'm going to use, because this one is right here, I'm going to use kind of the 2 that are far over out of the way. So in case I need to add more stuff later, I have access to it. So I won't use the closest 2 that I can use, because maybe something is going to hook up to the other side of the robot. So I'll use, I guess it's these 2. So these 2, and these 2. So we have to be careful as we go through here. They're paired, red, black, then red, black, then red, black. You got to make sure they go into a matching pair. You can also see down here on the PDH, you can see better kind of on this side, that label that goes in here, it touches 2 of these. So you can see the white label here is touching that red one and that black one. So you know those 2 are the 2 that it's connected to. And so we have to kind of do the same thing here. So I'm going to go for 7. I'm going to take the 2 on 7 and lift them up. And the number that it plugs into doesn't matter. You don't have to remember the number at all. And just get the wire to go in down here on the bottom. And you slide that in and then lower the lever and give it that tug test. And, you know, pull with a little bit. Don't be gentle with it. Don't pull like you're trying to break it apart, but, you know. And then let's do the red one next to it. Okay, that's good. And then when we mount this, these wires can sort of hop up like that. And we'll have some strain relief that way. So that looks pretty good to me. Okay, then the next one we're going to put on the other side here. So we can do either the ones next to it or one over. I'll go right next to it. I'll go in 8, I think. But we got to strip those wire ends first. So get your wire strippers. And I absolutely love these automatic ones. I guess they're made by a company called StripMaster. I used to use the other kind, the manual kind. And those are fine until you have to strip like hundreds and hundreds of wires in a row. And that's when I got these. All right, let's lift up our number 8 spots. Feed in the black wire. Make sure too that black wire is going into the black port here, and the red wire is going into the red port. And it will matter for our black and white cable here too in a minute. Make sure that goes in and lock it down. Okay, and then we have a bunch of places where this could end up too. So we're pretty happy. Like, we got lots of options where those things can mount. Everything seems nice over there. Let's go ahead and hook up the other side the same way. So we're going to put those into some of these ports over here. Now, the ones that matter the most are these 2, because they have to get all the way over so that our wires coming down from our feed and our shooter, especially the shooter wire, this one right here, the top motor, that one just barely is going to have enough. So we need to make sure that that wire is going to a speed controller that's in a good spot for it. Okay, so we are going to, let's put these two for the drive off to the side, and these two, which are going to be for our shooter and feed wire. We're going to use the first two ports here so that we can get as close to where those things plug in as possible. And it's the same process. We're going to strip the wire, red and black, and then we're going to feed them in. And tug, looks good. Other one. And tug, feels good. Okay, and then we'll do our other one here. So one was for our shooter, one for our feeder. I'm still willing to switch which one is which based on how the wires on the other end work out. Okay, and we'll do 11 for this one. So red goes in. Tug test, looks good. Black wire. And if you have to twist these a little bit, you can. But I think by design, they're supposed to go in straight for the clamp to work as well as possible. But if you twist them, they're going to be OK too. All right, so those are both in and good, and they're going to be over here, which means now we can look at our other two for our drive motors. And we're just going to do the same thing again. So we're going to strip the wires, and then we'll go ahead and lift up. I'm at number 12 now. So this method of laying stuff out and wiring by connecting the wires first, like our wires are kind of short here. We don't have a ton of choice for where to put this. You do have the option of laying everything out, mounting it, and then just creating wires that are the right length. This way is a little bit faster, saves some time for us, especially since everything just barely fits. But as you add more and more systems, if you added another set of speed controllers to power something else on this robot, you'll probably have to use longer wires for it. Okay, and last drive motor here. We're going to strip them again. Lift up. I'm at 13 now. Don't forget to tug test every time. All right, those look good. Okay, now I think we're ready to start connecting to the motors. And so to connect to the motors, we need to have some way of connecting our wires together. And again, there are lots of options that you can use. You can solder them directly together. You can use the spade connectors that were in the kit of parts. And we'll do one with the spade connectors so you can see how that goes. But my strong recommendation is that you get some of these Wago lever nuts and use those. They're great. Okay, so let's work our way through here. We've got our shooter motor, which is the top motor here for the top wheel. That one we're going to start to bring down. And that one we're going to try to connect to, I guess we're going to connect that to the closest set of wires that we have here. So we're going to want to connect these wires together. Okay, and we'll go ahead and do a lever nut connection first. You'll also notice on the output here for A, B, and C, we have a black wire, a red wire, and I said black, red, and white. So we have an extra color here. The third wire is if we are using a brushless motor. So the motors we're using are all what we call brushed motors, and those you just need to send them voltage, and they'll spin based on the amount of voltage you send them. Brushed motors actually will turn their motors on and off in order to get or their magnets on and off in order to get the motor to spin. But for that to work, you need to have a sensor inside that tells you kind of what position the rotor or the output is in order to know which magnets should be polarized one way versus the other way. So for the 6 motors we're doing here, that white wire is useless. It's just going to hang out. Don't cut it off, though, because you might need it in the future. So here we're just going to strip the red and black wires. Okay. And the lever nuts, again, you take a lever nut, lift up on the orange tabs. I mean, this works exactly the same way that the PDH was working. So we lift that up. I'm going to take the black wire and just try to get all the strands to go in. You can actually see on the bottom, if you look from the bottom here when you're doing it, you can actually see the wires going in. You'll know when they're in kind of far enough. You might have to push a little bit to get them to go in. Then just lower it and tug. It's not going anywhere. So this black wire, we're going to connect to the black wire on our shooter motor. Okay, so that should be the top motor. And that is now connected. That's how easy the lever nuts are. Next to that, we'll go ahead and do, let's do one more lever nut, and then we'll do the other option. All right, so one more lever nut here. And again, this is we're doing the very top motor. So this one's the shooter. The second motor is our feeder. And so we're connecting the top one first because that has the longest direction or distance for the wires to go. So we're going to give it preference in everything. All right, so let's get the other red wire from our speed controller, our SparkMax speed controller here, and pass that one in. You do have to kind of push a little bit, it feels like, to get that to go in all the way. That's good. Passes the tug test. And then we're going to get the red wire from the shooter motor and do that one next. And that one's good. All right. So these wires now, it looks like we even have room for them to kind of route over here to the side and not get into too much trouble. Okay, let's do the next one, which is the feeder motor. So the second wheeled motor here, the lower one. And we'll do this one we'll do one of them with the spade connector, just in case that is what you're stuck with and that is what you are going to be using. And they do work. You just have to make sure to get your crimp nice and tight and make sure they're plugged in all the way. Okay, so our second speed controller down here, let's go ahead and strip those wires. Okay, and for the spade connectors, you need to find, there are two different kinds. One of them is going to be, they call it the male one, but it just has a single slot of metal in it. And then the female side has kind of a, I don't know, it's a whole like section, a bent around section. So they should fit together. So you're not going to be able to plug two of the same one into each other. You need one of each type. And it doesn't matter which one goes on which wire. So we'll just take one on, we'll do it on the black wire here. Slide that on. And then this is just like the ring terminals we were using earlier. You get your crimping tool or whatever you have to crush this down with, and you just crush it as much as you can. And these are really easy to not crimp enough, so definitely give that a tug test after you're done. Okay, and then on the other side, the other black wire, this time coming from our feeder motor, we're going to do the same thing. Feed that in, get the crimper, and we crush it down as much as we can. Oh, okay. And we'll give that a tug test. Looks like my housing's split a little bit. Okay, and then those you can line up and plug them in together. They don't plug in necessarily super easily, so a lot of the time you might have to kind of, wiggle them to get them to go. And my housing twisted a little bit when I crimped it too, so let me convince that to move back a little bit towards where we want it to be. There we go. All right, and I still got to kind of like wiggle it a lot. You need to push this in a little bit harder than you think. So make sure that it is in a decent amount. You can see how much it overlaps by maybe, a quarter inch, 5/16 of an inch. And again, you want to tug test that. Okay, so that is that. And now to take this apart is really hard. I'm wiggling and I'm pulling as hard as I can. And now it's out. So one of the reasons why I like the other one better is if we needed to take one of our lever nut connections apart here, you just lift it and it comes right out. That's it, you're done. So these are just so much easier. They are a little bit more expensive though. All right, and let's lever nut our other wire. So we've got the red wire from this speed controller that we're gonna use. And the red wire from our feeder motor coming up from above. There we go. Tug test is good. Okay, so those are gonna be in that area somewhere. And now you got these two. that we have to connect to our drive motors over here. So the drive motors, if you bundled all your wires up like I did, make sure you separate them. Make sure you have the two wires coming from the same motor, and not, one wire from each motor, because that will do weird things, very weird things. All right, and let's go ahead and I think I'll do this motor to this speed controller, this motor to this speed controller, because it makes sense to me. Like this one, the front ones and the back ones. Let's strip again the red and black wires on that speed controller. And then let's do the lever nuts. Now, this whole time we've been doing like the black wire to the black wire on the motor. If your motors spin the wrong way later when you got everything hooked up, turns out if you flip here the AB ports so that black goes to red and red goes to black, that will just change the polarity of the motor, so it'll spin the opposite direction. So if something is spinning the wrong way and you can't figure out how to fix it in code, turns out you can switch the wires like that. Now, if you switch the wires on the other side where it's V plus and V minus, it's not going to work. And depending on what gets plugged in backwards on that side, it could do damage. So the motors can be plugged in backwards, but nothing else should be plugged in backwards. Right, let's do the red wire as well. Looks good. Tug test pass. And then we've got our last one here. So same process. Strip the wires. And then we get our lever nut. Push it in, lock it in. Get the one from the motor. I definitely got to straighten these out a little bit. And then they all go in. Looks good. Tug test. Yep. One more lever nut. Okay. And I should mention the lever nuts, now that we're done using them, they do have a strip gauge. They show you how much wire to strip if you measure from the end. That's what that arrow is towards the end on mine. I think probably they will all have it, but for sure the Wago brand ones all have that strip gauge. But it turns out you can be a decent amount bigger or smaller on how much you strip, and it's still going to work fine. Okay, all of our motors are now connected. Let's connect the other end of our speed controllers into our RoboRio, and then we'll know everything fits. Then we can go in and mount all 6 of our, oh wait, we didn't do all 6 of our speed controllers. Time out, let's get back in here. The other side drive, we have not done yet. So we're gonna repeat the process 2 more times. Strip the wires on the speed controller in here. And again, this one is going to be on this side, so I'm going to do the closer motor to it. So we need a few more lever nuts. One of the wires didn't go in, so one of the little strands didn't go in. So, oh, and it didn't go in again. Okay, hold on. Try again. It's good to try to make sure none of the strands are sticking out, right? Because there is electricity there. You don't want that to get caught up in the wrong spot, or you could end up with a short, or weird stuff could happen. With the motor power wires, it's usually not as important as some of the smaller sensor type wires. But all right, tug test. It passes. Let's do the next one. So we've got the red one over here on this SparkMax. And make sure this red wire is from the same motor. So that's this one right here. Tug test. All right, and then our final speed controller here. And things are starting to get messy, but don't worry, we are going to clean up all of these wires. I'm going to reroute them in just, I don't know, a few minutes. Okay, one more set of lever nuts. Tug is good. And the last one. For real this time. And the tug test passes. Okay, so this is going to end up somewhere here. This is going to end up somewhere here. We do have some extra wires in the way. We want to find a place now for our RoboRio in here. Okay, so now the other part of the speed controller that we haven't plugged in is our PWM cables, those white and black wires. So let's take a look at where those are going to go on our RoboRio in here. So we need to find this section over here labeled PWM. And I think the direction that everything is laying right now, it doesn't quite reach. My farthest away one here can't quite get to where I want it to go to plug in. So I'm probably going to rotate this, but if you have this problem, we have these extension cables. They are white, red, and black because some things you carry power, 5-volt power too. Doesn't matter, the red wire is not going to hurt anything. And inside the box, the SparkMax boxes, we had those little connector shrouds that I was talking about. So you can kind of see, we could go in here again. And if you're doing this, the most important thing is to make sure that white and white line up and the black wire line up. So the direction the connectors are facing doesn't matter as long as you see the white wire running straight through and the black wire running straight through, that's connected the right way. Then you could take this little housing and it actually just kind of snaps on both of them like this. And now it won't unplug. So that's super important. Those PWM cables will unplug very easily if you don't have something like this on them. Now, if you run out of these connectors or these shrouds to hold it in place, or you just used them all up, or you can't find them, electrical tape the wires together, just so it has something that stops it from pulling apart. Okay, but like I said, we're going to do a slightly different solution here, just to keep our wiring as simple as possible. I think if we rotate this, now we can get to everything. So, in the code, the default code for this robot, the left motors are going to be on 1 and 2, PWM ports 1 and 2. The right motors are then going to be on ports 3 and 4. And I think it's rear and then front. So rear is 1, front is 2. Although I don't think it matters if you flip them. As long as you have the two lefts together and the two rights together, we're going to be good. So don't forget, the front of the robot is the direction that we are going to launch the notes out of. So this is the front. The square, flat, straight up vertical support here is the front of the robot. That means that this is the robot's right and this is the robot's left. So if we dive in now, we're going to be following the right motors and the right speed controllers, and those are going to go into, like I said, 3 and 4. And the direction that these plug in, you can plug these in backwards. It won't hurt anything, they just won't work. If you go all the way down to kind of this corner over here, you'll see some lines. So one of them says S, the middle says 6V. I think I said 5 volts earlier, it's 6 volts. And the bottom one is like an umbrella. And those lines next to the dot line, those kind of the other direction lines, is the symbol for ground. So ground is going to be the black wire. That's why this bottom row here towards the edge of our RoboRio is the black wire. And S stands for signal. So that's the signal wire. So our white wire is going to be on the other side. Red wire would go in the middle, but we don't have any red wires on these. Okay, so those are in, I have my, let's see, I have the rear one in 3 and the front one in 4. Then on the other side, I'm going to take the rear motor and I'm going to go into port number 1. And then I'll take the second one here, the front motor, and go into port number 2. But again, the biggest thing is just get lefts and rights on the same side. And we'll make sure those are plugged all the way in. Okay, so we learned by not connecting this until this point, you know, would all of these wires really fit with where we're kind of hoping to mount stuff? And the answer is now they do, with it rotated. Okay, then we've got our shooter motor and our feed motor. So remember, the shooter motor is the top one. That's the one that's going to touch the note last as it launches it out of the robot. The feeder one is the second one, the slightly lower one. And so we have to make sure to follow them right. So let's follow the feeder motor down to its speed controller. So that's this speed controller here. And on this speed controller, we're going to take the PWM cable that's coming out of it, and we're going to plug that one right into number 5. Okay, so left drive, right drive, feeder, and then we have one more left. This is the shooter, and that is going to go into PWM 6. So it looks like 0 got skipped. There's no real reason for that, but it does mean we have an opening here. So if we put a second SparkMax on that side of the RoboRio, it'd be easy to plug it in. So it's nice to kind of have options on both sides. But really, you can use any number you want for any of these PWMs. You just need to make a list that tells you what's plugged in where. So when we get to programming, you can make sure that you're controlling the right one. And we've hooked these up so that they match the code that is the default code that's being released with the robot. So, all right, now, all of these are plugged in. We're ready to go back in and figure out how to mount all of these in whatever place we want to mount them in. So, I think we'll start by Velcroing the RoboRio down. Let's find a good spot for the RoboRio, and then we're just going to Velcro it down. And what I'm thinking here is I want to probably push it towards the right side of the robot just a little bit. So I have more room on the left side for all of these other speed controllers to fit. So, oh yeah, we'll go, I could even rotate this one sideways and get even more space. But at some point, this one doesn't reach. So it feels like if I mount this here, that's about as far as I would want to go. So it looks like somewhere right around there is going to be good. And this is another job for the Velcro or the dual lock stuff here. So we'll just measure this, make sure it is the length of the RoboRio. And again, I mean, this was free. It was in the kit of parts, so I'm not going to skimp on it. I'm going to make sure we get plenty of Velcro holding this down. And we'll just make a second one that is the same size. So we'll measure that up. And we'll just make a second one the same size. Okay, perfect. And let's go ahead and get these now on our RoboRio. So I'm just going to kind of tip it, flip it over. And we'll peel one side off. This is all exactly the same as what we did, for the previous step. Now, if you do want to mount it more securely, that is up to you. I've never had trouble with the Velcro, but these slots on the side are actually for zip ties to go through. So you could end up drilling a hole through the wood and running the zip tie through to lock it in place more. But my suggestion is start with the Velcro, and only if that becomes a problem, worry about doing more. Is it? Yeah, this way. All right, so we'll get that squeeze down on there. Make sure you press everywhere so it sticks well. And then our second one. And I'm kind of putting it in a way that the Velcro or the zip tie holes, the cable tie holes are left open. So we could use them later if we wanted to. All right, let's peel off both sides. And then we're going to flip it over and get back to, well, actually, before I flip it over again, I'm going to kind of wipe the area off, make sure there's no sawdust there. And then let's find our spot. So I think our spot was right about here. So I'm just checking this wire. That's going to be my tightest wire. And I'm pretty comfortable with it in this position. I'm also going to make this so there's a small gap between it and the churro. I don't want it touching the churro, so it's a little bit easier to take that churro out. Although this just being Velcroed in, it's not hard to move this out of the way. All right, and let's push it down. Make sure that glue sets. Now, realistically, the official correct way to do this is after that you stick that down. You don't want to be pulling this up again until that glue has had time to set. So you actually want to leave it alone for, I don't know what they recommend, an hour or 24 hours. Just be careful. If you're pulling it up now, you can end up peeling the glue off instead. Although I didn't have that problem on the PDH. So that looks in, it's good, it's not going anywhere. I'm happy with that. So now we are ready to start mounting all of our speed controllers, our SparkMaxes. And those we're going to use zip ties for. And if you look on top of them, they all have this weird shape. They all have this shape in here where there's a little cutout. So just above V plus and V minus, there's this little cutout on the side. And just below A, B, and C, there's this little cutout. The idea is a zip tie can fit in there and sort of lock into the edges. So what we're going to do is we're going to just put this down where we want it. we're gonna drill a hole on this side, drill a hole on this side, and then pass a zip tie around. Then we'll do the same thing on the other side. And then we'll just do that for all of our speed controllers. Now, we can use a number of sizes for drill bits. 1/4 inch is okay. I think 1/4 inch is a little bit big for what we have out there. You could probably get by with 3/16, I think is sort of an exact fit. So I'm gonna go a little bit bigger than that, but not quite up to 1/4. But if all you have is the 1/4 inch drill bit, go for it. I'm gonna do 7/30 seconds. And you can double check that it is gonna be good by seeing that it is bigger than your zip tie. So, and I know the zip tie fits through the 3/16 holes because that is, you know, what these holes are. All right, let's put that in the drill. And I guess we'll get the safety glasses going too. So basically, we're just gonna kind of hold this where we want it to go. And you could go through and mark both sides. So I could go in here and just do a little, you know, a little dot and a little dot. And then same thing on this side. And then we could go in and just kind of drill where those dots are. You could probably get by with just kind of holding it where you want it to be, getting your drill set, moving it out of the way, and drilling the hole. But we got our 4 dots, so I'm just gonna kind of move it out as much as I can out of the way. And then just drill right on the dot, right on the dot, and 4. All right, let's wipe most of that off the robot. Okay, then this is going back down to that position. So there's the tricky part. You might want to tip the robot up to do this, but we have to go down from the top, and then we've got to go back up through that other hole. And I'll see if I can find it without needing to tip the robot on its side. There we go. Okay, so you can pull that through. And I actually would suggest, while nothing is in the way, go ahead and do the second one as well. You kind of feel where the hole is. There it is. So now we're set. Let's drop our speed controller back in. And we're just going to make sure that this is in those grooves on the speed controller when we go ahead and tighten it down. So now, with that one, it maybe can wiggle around a little bit, but it actually can't fall out. And 1 zip tie probably would be enough to hold it for the whole season, but we're going to do 2. Okay, just make it as kind of as tight as you can, and there we go. That one is mounted. And this one, we'll deal with the extra wire later, but we could maybe have even put that in the zip tie as we were going. All right, let's work our way to our next group here. This one we kind of want to just keep out of the way so that the other 2 have room. And this is weird, like normally I like to line everything up like this, but our wires get a little bit tight. So I actually think I kind of like this radial pattern like this in order to connect them all. And then these wires, do they get over here? Yes, because I want to be able to run these wires up and down this post. I don't want these wires just dangling like this. We're going to route the wires so that they're, you know, protected and they're right next to this post, and there's nothing, it's less likely for things to get in there and hook on them and get caught. But it looks like we have plenty of space to do that kind of no matter where we are, as long as we're in this area. So yeah, I think we're just going to do this. I like this pattern where the insides are kind of all next to each other. And yeah, let's do it. So I'm going to just kind of move those ones out of the way, and we're going to work our way over to them. So first this one, and I'll pull this one out a little bit farther just so that I leave a little bit more room for the other ones. And we're going to drill right on the inside there and there, and let me slide that over so I'm on the dots. And then on this side we're going to drill here and here. Okay, get that out of the way. Let's drill again. And you got lots of air on these holes. As long as you're somewhere close, it's going to work. All right, bring our next one. Oh no, let's set the zip ties first. That made it easier, I think. So. Here we go. And there that one is. All right, same thing. Kind of line it up. Do we want to put this here? Maybe we do. I can see that making sense. I'm going to tuck that white wire into these zip ties as we go. You can either do it that way, or we'll just zip tie those wires up, afterwards when we're managing all of our wires. All right, there's 2 down. Okay, we need to make sure we have room for these 2 to both fit. So it looks like around here is pretty good for this one. Get that one out of the way. All right, and so this one is going to be just very close here, and there, and there. Or thereabouts. So this one I need to be careful. Make sure those wires stay away from the drill. There we go. All right, let's get our zip ties in. And which one was it? This one. You can also label your speed controllers too. You can put a little sticker on them or a different colored sticker so you know which one is which. That never hurts, especially if you have lots of wires that are running together over a long distance. We don't have that problem too much on this robot. You can, especially with our very short wire leads, the way we've been wiring this, you can usually just tell where things are going by looking. But if it ever gets complicated, having some kind of labels on there is always helpful. All right, that one is in. And now we've got our last one on this side. So we're going to be like right there and right there. And then there and there. All right, let's go. The last dot was almost impossible to see. Okay, in general, we'll probably run the vacuum in here after we're done with all of our hole drilling as well, just to try to pull out as much of the debris as we can. But again, the good part of the wood is it's not going to really hurt anything if it gets tangled up or if it gets in places. Okay, let's feed this one through. There we go. Tighten this one down. Oops, I forgot to tuck the wire in. That's all right, we'll tuck it in just on this one and it'll still hold it. Okay, so this side is all in and mounted. Let's do the other side, and then we can kind of route these wires nicely so they're out of the way and not getting into trouble. All right, let's do this one next. So we'll go here and here and there and there. And the other cable tie. Very nice. Okay, we'll bring this back. Tuck the white wire in. Okay, last one. Do we want to be straight? Do we want to be straight this way? Do we want to be on a diagonal? I think I want to go this way. I think that way makes me the happiest. So there and there, there and there. All right, 2 more cable ties. Here we go. Huh. Why is the last one the hardest one? There we go. Okay, let's drop that in. Tuck the white wire in. All right, so those are all in and mounted. Our next goal is to tidy up all of these wires. There's a few reasons that we're going to try to keep our wires as neat as possible. The first thing is we want them so that we can visually tell where things are going. That helps us troubleshoot problems. That's going to mean that you're going to have less electrical issues. The other thing is when you just got this rat's nest that's going on in here, things are going to get caught on that. When you're reaching inside the robot to work on stuff, you're grabbing it, you're pulling on stuff. Wires that are getting pulled on or getting strained are wires that are going to at some point fail on you. So we want to make sure that it's nice and it's clean, it's going to look better, and it's going to function better. So we have some smaller zip ties that we can use, and we have some more of those big ones. And we're going to go through and we're just going to bundle stuff up and get it out of the way. So the first place I'm looking is here on the front. So we're going to work on this shooter motor. And I want to just get over from the motor itself to this vertical beam that we can kind of ride down. We can trace our way down on. And so I guess I'm going to get one of these bigger zip ties, and that's going to be the first step. And I'm going to want not to pull this, don't pull this down so it's tight like that. I'm going to go straight over, and I'm going to leave just a little bit. So when this is on and tight, there's a little bit of slack up here. We never want to have everything like pulled as tight as it can be. When it's lined up, because that's just already adding some strain to it, right? Then we're going to bring the feed wires down, and we're going to kind of join it over here. Get them both kind of nice. And bonus points if you make all the wires line up and sit flat and look pretty. But the most important thing is that we kind of get it strain relieved to this side beam here. So make sure that's going over all of those. Pull tight. Okay, and then we're going to follow down a little bit lower here. The one thing that we want to watch out for here as we get down towards the bottom is we don't want to get caught in the wheel. So I think at some point I might actually want to go around the corner like that. And just like a lot of things on this robot, there is no right answer. You can get this to work in a number of different ways, just whatever, whatever way works for you. Okay, and then this last bit here from this speed controller, these are a little, well, they're a little tangled up, so I'll actually disconnect this one and untangle them. But there's a lot of extra slack here that we want to deal with. So we don't want that just to run and go crazy. So we want to find somewhere to join that up so it's not running free. So I think actually I'll just bundle that with the other set of wires here going into the other SparkMax. The other option too is you could take this down to the wood down here and drill some more holes and then zip tie that right down into the board. But I think I'll just take a small zip tie for now and go here. And it probably, I mean, the right way to do it, the best way to do it, there's no one right way, but the best way to do it is probably to drill holes and anchor these right down to the wood board on the bottom. But we'll zip tie those in. That looks pretty good. So now these, right, like they're pretty protected, and they're also not going to get in the way of anything. All right, let's see. Had to unplug that because it was wrapped around my drive motor wires here. So let's do the drive motors on this side now. And there is a lot of extra wire here, so we get to choose where do we want all this extra wire to end up. I could kind of bundle it up right on the motor over here, which seems like a pretty good way to go. I could bring the wires over to this sidewall here and bundle it on that as well. And it depends on just where you're attaching other stuff and what other stuff you're attaching. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring these over this way. And maybe we'll reuse some of the holes that are on the side here. So I'll kind of go to where those holes are. So I think I can use a couple of these holes here, like this. And I'm just going to bundle these all up. Let's see, we'll go, do we want to go before or after the connectors? That is the question. I'm going to go, I think I'm going to go after the connectors. Okay, that seems pretty good. And then all of these will come back together to our motors here. Something like that. And then on the motors, we will just handle kind of the extra loop here of stuff. Okay, that looks good. So let's do kind of one more bundle here. So I'm going to turn these into so they act like one big wire through that section. Okay, and then let's get one of our zip ties. And if you have zip ties and they're too short and they don't reach, turns out you can take two zip ties and put them together. So if I feed them in and get the clicking sound going, now I have a longer zip tie. So that should make it around the motor now. Okay, and we're trying to just have this down and pick up all of our extra slack here. Something like that, I think, is pretty good. I want to make sure these wires have no chance of getting anywhere near the moving wheels, because that would be the worst if they got stuck in the drivetrain. So that feels all right. So this side, you can see it's a whole lot neater. These wires here, I don't think we have to do anything with them just because they're so short and they're going right into where they're going. But you could add some extra stuff on those. And then same thing with these PWM wires here. These ones, because they're kind of easy to accidentally unplug, might be worth doing something with them. Let's see what we can come up with here. So I think if we sort of bring them down together this way, that's going to help too, because now you got to kind of unplug all of them at once. And I think I'm just going to grab them onto, maybe I can get them onto this metal churro that's right here. So let me see if I can pass one of these tiny zip ties under that churro or not. It might be too tight, but we're going to find out. What if I push down on the wood board? Oh yeah, we can do it. All right. So we'll fish that back up. And what you can do sometimes is start the zip tie before making everything neat the way you want it. Then you don't have to worry about starting the zip tie while holding everything exactly in place. So then I can sort of bring these back so they make that nice flat shape. And then all I got to do is hold the zip tie the rest of the way closed. Okay, so that looks pretty nice. Okay, other side, let's do the same thing. Okay, so we have all these wires. I think we'll just do exactly the same thing we did on the first side there. So let's find these couple holes that we can use. Okay, and then let's grab both of these. And again, we want to make it so after the zip tie, we're going to connect all of these right here. Right. And then we'll do the tiny one. Kind of bundle these up and keep them looking, keep stray wires from running away, I guess, is the biggest thing. Okay, and we want that to sort of run like this, and then the rest of it, we're gonna add to a loop right here on this motor. And I think we need 2 zip ties for this one. So we'll make another double zip tie setup here. And again, I'm just going to kind of get this one started, and then we'll tuck these wires back in where we want them to go. That looks good. I like that. And just pull them tight. Okay. And let's see, do we want to do anything with our last 2 PWM cables here? Yeah, we probably should. So like those going down to like there. So again, let's try to feed a zip tie under the churro by pushing down on the wood board. Go over these, get them lined up the way we like. Okay, and then zip tie them down. and I might have unplugged one, so I'm going to plug it back in. All right. So you can tell now that is much neater. We can kind of tell where all the wires are going. And there's much less, almost no risk of anything getting tangled and caught up here. So that section is done. I'm going to go through really quickly and snip all of the zip tie ends. And I'm using my flush cutters again. And then we're going to get started on, there's a few more pieces that we have to wire. We got the radio left to do. And then there's a few more power lines. We got to do the power for the RoboRio. And there's one set of CAN lines that we have to do, even though we're using PWM instead of CAN control for this robot. I guess with this, the most important thing is just don't cut the wires. All right, so now we're going to get our RoboRio hooked up. We need to do power, and we need to do CAN lines between it and the PDH, our power distribution hub. So we're going to need the smaller wire that was in the kit of parts. It's coiled up. It is 18 gauge wire. Actually, to power the RoboRio, you could use as small as, I think, 22 gauge wire, but we've got the 18. It's not really going to hurt anything, so let's use that. We also need this 18 gauge wire to be able to power our radio power module later, and that one does have to be 18 gauge wire, so just use the one set that we have here. Also, we need our yellow and green wires, so these are the CAN wires. And let's go ahead and jump into our little Rio in here. They're actually labeled L green, H yellow, and that's our CAN port. And the way these connectors work is you actually press down. So there's this white section here, and you can press down on this white section, and that opens up the spot next to it to put the wires in. So I'm going to take the CAN wires that I have, and we will push down on, let's say, the green one first, and I'll feed the green wire into there and let go. This one especially, give it a tug test. You know, I'm pulling enough that you can kind of see the RoboRio trying to lift, and it's not coming out. You got to make sure these are in all the way, or they can cause you all kinds of problems. These ones, yes, but especially the next ones are the most important. All right, so there are CAN wires. We're going to have to route those over to our PDH here in a second. But we also do need these 18 gauge wires that we were working on here. Okay, and so for those, we're going to have to strip them. So let's go ahead and strip those wires down. 18 gauge. Okay, I used the 18 spot, but it cut a bunch of the wires. So if you ever have that happen, just clip it off and try again. Because it was stranded versus not stranded. Yeah, all right. So we're going to strip those two. There we go. And on the RoboRio, we don't actually have to put these wires in while it's in the robot. There is a connector here. And so this one is the input. It's VC labeled on it. To the sides of the VNC, though, there is a little flathead screw in here. So I can use my screwdriver to go ahead and unscrew this. Okay, and then this whole thing will just lift right out of the RoboRio. Then, if you turn it, there are screws on the other side as well. So there are these flathead screws here. And these are the ones that are going to tighten the wires in. So I'm going to take the wires from the side. So V stands for voltage. So that's going to be our red wire. And you can see when I put the red wire in, that's all the way in, but I can see some of the wires sticking out. If you see any wire here instead of just insulation, that means I stripped the wire too far. So we're going to have to trim some of that off. If I do the same with the black wire, that one is good. So what I'm going to do is, I'm not going to do this over the board because I don't want the little bits of wire to fall down into things, right? Because these are conductive. So I'll just go over here and we'll do a little trim on that. And didn't really need to trim the other one, but I'll make them the same length. Okay, so now we can go back to our connector and we'll slide the black wire into the C spot for common. Okay, and then we will grab the screwdriver and start tightening that screw down. And that screw is going to tighten into it, just kind of like the way the battery lugs worked. Okay, and give that the tug test. These wires especially, I've worked on helping robots get and stay connected to the field. These wires are often one of the problem locations, so make extra sure these wires are in clean. There are no extra strands of those wires sticking out, and that they're in nice and tight and they pass that tug test, okay? Once they're in, we can now plug this back into our board here. And then we'll screw it down from the top. Okay, then these wires, we're going to kind of route as we go this time, because everything else is sort of fixed in position. And eventually these wires are getting somewhere over here on the PDH. So we're going to try to route them. I'm going to actually just bundle them up together because they're basically going to the same place, right? And we're going to find a way, like we could go this way maybe, over. That seems reasonable. Or we could go this way over. And that also seems reasonable. Well, okay, so it's all reasonable. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to just roughly lay this out. So I'm going to want to go like to here, and then to here, and then this way across to the PDH over here. And the area we're looking for on the PDH is over here where the yellow and green connectors are, as well as, if you remember those fuses that we put in earlier. So the red and black wire are going to go into one of those fuses, and then the yellow and green wire are coming around the corner to here. So I'm going to give myself a little bit of extra room. This way I don't have to deal with all of the extra cable. And I'll go ahead and snip these off here. We'll probably trim these one more time. So if you really want to save every last bit of your wire, then you could route it every step of the way. But I find it's easier sometimes to route when you have short ends to work with. So now we can go back over to where we started on our Rio over here. And there's a few things that we want to do. We probably want to find or get some places where we can anchor these down, so that they're not, pulling around or doing anything. So we probably want to do some holes here in our board. So let's do that. We'll grab our drill. I could probably go to an even smaller drill bit size here, but since this one is loaded up, that is what I will use. And I'm just going to kind of eyeball where I want them to go. And here we want 2 holes, but close together, because these are small wires. So I'm going to get pretty close together, like that. And let's see, we might want to use the very tiny zip tie for this because we don't have that much wire to deal with. And let's see if we can get that to go back through the other hole here. There we go. Okay, and so I'm going to take all of these wires and we are going to just kind of dip down to the board here. And that'll be our initial sort of strain relief or anchor point. Okay. Just make sure we make that kind of as tight as we can do it. Then we're going to route them now. See, those places where this was twisted up are fighting me a little bit. So we're going to go to here. And then I think I'm going to go under everything else. So I'm going to actually feed this, so over here where we had our PWM cables and stuff, I'm going to feed this under the PWM cables, under the row of wires here. So it runs on the bottom. I'll just kind of grab that and pull it through. Okay, then now that that's kind of where we want it to go, it looks like I'm going to need to do another set of holes kind of at the corner here where we change directions. So we'll go ahead and do another pair of holes drilled here. Let's just move the wires out of the way for us. And if you don't want to drill all of these holes for some of the wires like this, they do make little adhesive anchors, cable tie anchors that you can use as well. And those just stick right down, and then you run the cable tie through them. I'm actually a pretty big fan of those, but sometimes the glue doesn't stick well enough. All right, so let's get this one in. That's good. All right, and so as we pull it through this area, what do we want to do? Here, I think I'm going to just kind of connect it to, these other bundle of wires that are here. We could drill more holes. We could pass another zip tie underneath that churro piece and anchor directly to that as well. Again, there's no right answer. Our goal is just to have stuff, kind of neat in how it's running, and definitely not loose so we can get into trouble. And I unplugged another PWM cable. Put that back in. All right. Now we're over here. So we're going to be ready to plug this directly in. We might want one more anchor, but so kind of move this around a little bit. So these ones are going to go right into 20 here. Port 20 here with the fuses. So I can cut them now right about here, I think is exactly where I want them to be. Leave yourself a little bit more than you might think. And these ones then are going to go around the corner and go in like that. So it's almost right. I'm going to trim just a little bit off. Okay, then let's go ahead and strip these wires. And I'll do the yellow and green ones while we're at it as well. Why not? Okay, and the way these connectors work is, just like on the RoboRio, there is a black and red button above them. So we're going to push down on the button above the spot, slide the wire in, let go, and do the tug test. Same thing for the red wire next to it. Okay, on that one, I left too much wire. I can still see bare wire. So I'm going to trim this again. This time I'm going to try to catch the ends in my hand here and carefully dispose of them on the floor. All right, then we can go back in and try one more time. Yep, that's good this time. Tug test passes. And then the green and yellow ones are coming around the corner here. You can use either of the spots. Just make sure you use a green and yellow that are, start on an end and do the two that are next to each other. So don't do the middle two and don't skip any. And give those both a tug test as well. Meanwhile, while we're here, there is a switch labeled terminate or term, and it has on and off. You want to just make sure that's pushed towards the on side. I think that's the way it comes by default, but if this switch were off, you'd want to push it back to on. And that just tells the CAN signal where to stop. All right, so we have these wires. They're almost good, but they're a little, I think we want a little bit, we want one more anchor point here, I think, and then we would be happy. So let's do that. So we're looking at drilling somewhere like here. It's a little hard to drill here. I'm on a little bit of an angle, but that's going to be okay. As long as we can get the zip tie through. about to find out if we can. Oh yeah. That might have been easier. My wire's inside there. And then we will tighten that zip tie. Okay, the RoboRio is now powered. We have CAN in. We have two things left to work on out on this side. Our radio and our radio power module now both need to get mounted and hooked up. I am going to go back to the Velcro game. So let's start with our radio power module here. We want to just make sure this is positioned such that it's easy enough to plug in an Ethernet cable on either side. Even if I go under these cables, that's okay. And then we'll have to put wires in here. But I'm going to basically cover the bottom of this in our dual lock Velcro stuff. So I'll kind of measure that up somewhere around here. That looks good. Let's do a second one. All right. And let's stick it on. Oh, that was that. Okay, okay. That was the end of the roll. So I gotta make one more cut here. Who knew? All right. I'm gonna just wipe off the area where I want to put it, peel these off. And I want the radio one pointing towards the outside of the robot here, and the RoboRio one pointing in, and the power will be pointing in. And let's just stick that down. This one as well, if you feel like the Velcro is not doing enough, you could do a couple holes and run a zip tie over the top. Or there are actually holes where you can drill and bolt it down. Okay, so that's mounted. Let's go ahead and wire that. So we need that 18 gauge wire from before. We need some more of that. And that is going to run from, so we used this port 20 here on our PDH. Now we're going to go for port 21, which is next to it. So we had the fused area that was 20, and now we have the other fused area that's 21. So I'm going to go ahead and strip these wires, and then we will stick them in to those little ports there. And once again, we do this by pushing down on the button above and sliding the wire in. Make sure all of the strands go inside. Nothing is sticking out. And give it that tug test. Very good. Okay, we don't have to go far with this one, so we're just going to kind of, maybe we'll go under this. So we need to be able to go like, probably zip tie it to that one, and then we need to get to about there. So we can cut it off there. We'll strip the ends of this one. Okay, and then these, you lower the levers, and then you push the wire down in from the top. So the red wire will go down in this hole right here, and then close that lever, and then we'll do the other wire next to it. Perfect. Give it the tug test. We'll just do one zip tie here onto the ground wire, our 6-gauge wire, because that is pretty sturdy and not going anywhere. And then maybe we'll do one more over here at the beginning. And we'll tie it to these other wires that we anchored down. I feel like I'll slide those in a little bit. That looks good. So just like that. Okay, so we have power here. And then the last thing we need to mount is our radio itself. Now the radio has these feet on it, so I'm not sure if the Velcro is going to be thick enough to work or not. So we'll try it, and if it doesn't work, we will continue trying other things. So I think I'm going to put it this way now, so this wire can kind of bend around easily and go in there. So we'll try one more time, get some more of this Velcro. And we'll see. It does look like it's going to stick up past the feet. So I think we have a chance here. All right, so we'll cut a few strips of this. And 2. Stick that one on. Stick this one on. We'll peel the outsides. And I don't know, that feels fine. Let's do it. Squeeze that down. That feels pretty good. Now the radio is a very important piece to stay connected. So I don't want this to come loose and start flopping around. So I am going to go ahead and drill one hole on the side of it here. And I'm going to pass a zip tie around the whole radio. So if you think about it, the Velcro definitely stops it from sliding around, and the zip tie is going to stop it from lifting up. So this should make it very secure. The radio is also a little bit heavier than the power module, so that's another reason why we'll do a little bit extra for the radio. All right, so that ain't going anywhere. And the last wires we need to finish all of this up are our 2 Ethernet cables. So get yourself your Ethernet cables. I think this one was in the kit, the other one I bought. So we've got this one, and we've got this one. And I don't know, doesn't really matter which one goes where. But the key is, on the radio, there are 2 ports on the back, 2 yellow Ethernet ports. One of them is next to the barrel connector, and one of them is just sort of in the middle of the radio. We want to put this in the one next to the barrel connector, next to the black section on the back there. Then the other end of this is going to plug into our Wi-Fi radio side of our radio power module. And that looks like, with all the extra stuff there, we're just in good shape. I might be convinced that you should, get a zip tie around. You know what, let's do it because it's so easy. We've got our churro bar here, so let's just go right around that churro to keep this from moving too much. And we'll just get that end zip tied in. There we go. Okay, and then the other one, this one I'm going to actually have to untwist here. This one is going to plug into the RoboRio side of our radio power module. And I got to go under that wire and plug it in. Very good. Okay, and then we're going to route this then back all the way to our RoboRio. And we can go, I don't know which way we want to go. I guess we'll end up going underneath kind of where, no, I'm going to go on top this time, but we're going to run this back along here, and it will eventually plug in to our RoboRio right there. Okay, then I'm just going to throw a couple quick zip ties on this so we don't have this extra stuff out in the way. And I think maybe I can just kind of tuck a lot of the extra up underneath this front bar here. So that seems to be working pretty well. So I'll just pass a zip tie through here. And I'll go back up this hole. Okay, so that should do a pretty good job of keeping that straight. And then just find somewhere we can just kind of attach this to other things that are already there. So I'm going to sneak a little one through the zip tie holding down this speed controller, and I'll get a little bit there. And then over on this end, where we're kind of joining up with all of this other stuff, I think we can just sort of grab onto these wires that are down here on the bottom right by where they're zip tied, where we drilled some stuff. Of course, you can drill more holes into the board if you want, just to secure it wherever you'd like to secure it. And I'll bring that down. And then the one thing I want to check here is if I needed to unplug this, do I have enough slack? And the answer is yes, no problem. So we can unplug that. We have enough slack to take it out and put it back in. All right, last step here before we kind of turn it on and make sure everything lights up is I'm going to go through and I'm going to trim all of the zip ties, and then I'm going to vacuum out as much of the sawdust and shavings as possible. Then we'll come back, we'll give the final once over and turn it on and give it a test. All right, we are going to now attach or wire up our robot signal light. So this light actually mimics some of the lights on the RoboRio and can be used to help troubleshoot your robot. It runs fine without this light, but by the rules we have to add it, so we're going to add it. In this video, we're just going to get it wired up, and then we'll come back later and find a good place to attach it to the robot. So on the bottom of the robot signal light, you can actually unplug this bottom bit, and there's this little connector that comes out. So we need this connector, and we need there is a 2-pin, 2-wire, it looks almost like our PWM cables, but it's only 2 wide instead of 3 wide over at the connector. So it has just red and black. And we're going to need just a little bit of black wire, that 18-gauge wire that we've been using. Okay, on the back of the connector, we have LA, N, and LB. We're going to connect LA and LB together along with the red wire, and then N is just going to be the black wire running all the way back. So first thing on this cable, we're going to clip one of the ends off. And you can clip it right at the edge. I don't know. One of the things I like to do is if you cut it here, then this side is still usable later. We'll have enough wire to strip and connect something to it. So I like to just, leave myself a little bit extra, although there's no real reason to do that here. And then you might have to peel these wires apart a little bit. Okay, and we're going to go ahead and strip the black wire first. Okay, and then the red wire. I guess it doesn't matter which order you strip them. Okay, and then I think I said black wire earlier, but we're going to take a little bit of red wire. So a section, I don't know, about that long, 1.5 inches, maybe 2 inches. And we're going to strip both ends of this wire as well. Okay, and this can be shorter. It works if it's shorter, but it's a little bit easier to do when it's long. So we're going to have to basically bend this in. Okay, so it is kind of facing this way. And on this connector, there are screws on top that you can screw in or unscrew. And when you screw them in, it crushes down. It closes this little opening on the side here. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take this red wire and just put one end of it in LB. And go ahead and tighten that in all the way. Okay, when it's tight, give it a tug test. That's good. Then in LA, we're going to put this wire in. So this is a jumper connecting LA and LB. And we're also going to put our red wire in, LA, with it. Then you can go ahead and tighten that screw down all the way. And tug test again. And then the black wire is going in the middle in the N port. So N is for neutral. I think LA and LB is live A and live B. All right, we'll tighten that up. Okay, tug test on that one, good. We can now plug this back into our robot signal light here. And if we bring our robot over, we're gonna go in right by the RoboRio here. And there was that port on the RoboRio labeled appropriately RSL for robot signal light. Okay, so that is buried deep in here. And it's labeled too. So we have S and we have our ground symbol here. So S is going to be red. Wait, that may be a 5. I don't know, I can't tell from here. But ground goes on the outside, the black wire to the outside like that. Okay, and then we have our robot signal light. This can go pretty much anywhere. The best way to do it is usually to drill a hole if you have a big enough bit into something and attach it. But if you have no other options, for example, you could just, grab some zip ties and attach it to the side of any post on the robot. I probably didn't need the double zip tie here, but we're committed now. Okay, and yeah, that's not great, but we'll leave it there for now, and we'll maybe change that mount later. All right, last thing we're going to do now that we have everything connected is we are going to do our power test. And when we do this, there are a few things we're going to look for. So the first thing is I'm going to go through, I'm going to visually check and make sure all the wires are in. I don't see any loose ends. I'm going to kind of glance past the areas where things plug in and make sure red wires are going into red ports or red wires are connected to red wires all the way through. And after I do a once over and that looks good, then we can take our battery and let's go ahead and put that inside the robot. Okay, and I don't really need to strap it in because we're not going anywhere. I'll plug that into our connector back here. Before you plug it in, make sure your power switch is turned off though. All right, so make sure you're pushing down on the red button here. That will turn it off. Remember, the lever in turns it on. So now, the next step is I'm going to turn the robot on and get a couple people to help you watch. But the idea is we are looking to see if anything starts smoking, if anything bad looks like it's happening. Then if you see that, immediately turn it off. Otherwise, we're going to go through and we're going to make sure we have lights on all of the various areas that should have lights, indicating that we have power going to those devices. So let's try it. I'm going to go ahead and flip the switch, and I'm looking for anything bad. And I'm not seeing anything bad. I'm seeing one thing bad. All right, let's work our way through. I think it's stable, it's safe. I can see on the radio, starting over here, I've got these blue lights turning on. And the light pattern will change when we program the radio, but if you've got some lights going, now I got an orange one, that's cool. Our radio power module, we've got our green LED that turned on, so we have power there, that's good. Of course, if we didn't have power here, we wouldn't be able to turn the radio on, so kind of guaranteed there. We've got 12.6, so we have a voltage readout on our power distribution hub. Don't worry about what the number says, just as long as you have something showing up there, you're good. Then we got to look inside the robot now. And we're going to look at our RoboRio. And the RoboRio has lights, has a power light and status lights going. So that looks good. And then the next thing that I noticed is none of our SparkMaxes are lit up. They are all turned off, no lights at all. And the reason is because we have one more step to do with them, and that is we did not put our fuses in. So grab your bag of fuses, make sure you find the ones that are labeled 40 because we want our 40 amp fuses for this. The different fuse sizes will depend on what motor you're using. Most of the motors are going to be 40 amps. All of these sim motors run at 40 amps, so that's what we're going to use. So on our power distribution hub in here, there were those slots that I mentioned earlier for the fuses. And what we need to do is, in port 7, we're going to take and plug a fuse in. And they are, I think they'll go either way, but they're stiff, and that's good. We want them to be stiff because we want this to be, hard to plug in and hard to unplug itself. And you'll notice the light has changed from being solid, and that's what we want to see. And the SparkMax over here that it's powering, now we got a light flashing. So that's good. Let's go through. We need to do 7. We need to do 8 for the other drive motor on that side. And I can see the light turned on for that one too, so we're good there. Then the other side, we started right on the end here. So we're going to plug some in. And okay, that one broke. I'm going to turn the robot off now and pull this one out. And we'll move on to a different one here. Okay. Plug another one in. There we go. And it probably is better to do this when the robot's off, but since nothing can move, we're kind of okay either way. But in general, when you're working on the robot, you should turn it off. All right, and then we need one more. And I think the one that I was working on that broke on me is definitely broken. So I'm going to grab one more. And this one's going to look slightly different. So if you buy the 40 amp fuses from Rev instead of the ones that came in the kit, they're going to be orange and they're metal on top. But they work exactly the same as long as they say 40 amp on top. So we're going to go ahead and plug this one in to our last spot right here. All right, and now I'm going to turn it back on. Everything still seems fine. Now I can see we have lights on all of our SparkMaxes. Okay, and that means we can go ahead and turn it off now. Our robot is now completely wired. So everything is wired in, it's plugged up, everything is sort of neat and in a safe space. So we're done wiring this robot. We've got a couple of small things left to do, like maybe find a better mount for our robot signal light. Then we still got bumpers and we've still got programming. So we're done for this video. We'll see you in the next one. Before we go, as always, special thanks to First and Argosy Foundation for making all of this possible.